Good afternoon and welcome to the Bee Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast. And Margot Cairnes, I'm so excited to welcome you to my podcast. So a huge big welcome
Thank you, Belinda.
all the way from Byron Bay.
Hmm.
Yeah, excellent.
That's where I am today.
Yes, I love
And
it. Margot, you have so much to share, and I'm so fascinated. You have so much experience, a globally renowned leader, leadership strategist, author, about to publish another book by the sounds of things, which you can share with us. Transformation advisor. You've spent over 30 years guiding boards and CEOs through some of the most complex organizational shifts in modern business. And you've like spanned continents and industries, and I can't wait to hear all about some of your stories. With your signature focusing on turning crisis into opportunities through deep cultural and strategic renewal. Have I got all that right?
yeah, and there's also quite a deep spiritual element to what I do.
Yes.
And when I started so many years ago, I kept it quiet. I got a whole language that allowed me to take people there without telling them that that's where I was taking them. But now I'm being a lot more upfront about it, because we are more than just a body. We are more than just a brain. We are well, I suppose spiritual beings in a physical form.
Yeah.
We do have emotions, and if we spend a lot of time closing down those parts of ourselves, it takes a lot of energy, and we do burn out, and we do get sick, and we do get dispirited and cynical and frightened, and it's too hard, just too hard. Better to be real.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I've already got questions around that language that you mentioned, that you used to probably mask, but now you're more overt with it because yeah, the minute you mention spiritual or whatever, you quite often get this, oh, that's a little bit too woo-woo. But like you're talking about, and I'm a massive believer in it, this mind, body, and soul connection. And a business also has for me a heartbeat, it has a soul as well. So why not harness it?
Well, Belinda, the truth is that in any 1 second, we process 40 bits of information consciously, right? In that same second, we process 40 million bits of information unconsciously. So unless we are tapping into the 40 million bits, we will be left behind. I mean, AI is so fast now, it's so far ahead of us. What we have is our human interconnectedness, we might call it the collective unconscious, and our humanness. So unless we can bring that to the party, we may as well all be, on the spectrum, the Alzheimer, the autism spectrum, or be machines, and we're not.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful that we do have neurodiversity, but let's have neurodiversity. Let's have heart and soul and emotion and spirit and humanity,
Yeah.
because AI is just so pervasive. So powerful. I mean, I love it. I've just finished writing an article about how I went from being a technophobe to an AI addict, which I am. I mean,
Right.
I put an article in AI and it comes back and it says, competent article, very inspiring. Would you like me to tidy it up? Or
I love
spiritual. This article is spiritual, and we found it interesting. Would you like us to tidy it up? And I go, isn't that wonderful? So not only do I get my articles tidied up, I get inspiration, I get congratulations.
same. Oh, I love it. It's like I said to my mum the other day, and I keep saying this, that I can't imagine a world, I can't imagine my life without it now, in terms of
Oh,
just
absolutely.
what it can do. But let's quickly take a step back because I did ask you a question when you were booking in to do the interview. And what was one unique insight around or experience in life, leadership, or business that you wanted to share? And you talked around this creating the leadership team that turned a failed mining company into two multi-billion dollar global giants. That's pretty massive. And the reason I interjected and kind of wanted to go back to that is because obviously transformation and everything we're talking around human connection, soul, spiritual, but also business. Can you share your story,
Sure. So I had the great
please?
privilege, Bea, for over 30 years of mentoring a guy called Greg Gailey. And Greg Gailey ended up the president of the Business Council of Australia. He was the chair of Caltex in Australia. Plus, he was on many, many, many global boards and committees. He was a remarkable businessman, and he and I turned around at least 3 different companies. So one of them was this company called Pasminco. And Greg had been doing a million, brilliant things overseas, huge global mergers, turnarounds, blah, 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 IPOs. And he came back to Australia at about 50, thinking, look, I'll just go happily on a board and retire. And by then he was already a very, very wealthy man. I'll just retire. Well, but nobody would employ him. And they wouldn't employ him because they hadn't seen it happen. It had happened overseas and they didn't know him because he'd been overseas all that time. And so who was he? So the only thing he could get was this company called Pasminco, which he didn't want, but they just kept offering him more and more money. So eventually he took it. And the day he walked in, he put it in administration. He said, this company is insolvent. It was the same day that Ansett went into administration.
Wow.
And Ansett, which was one of our major airlines, and they sacked all their people, they sold all their assets. Greg said, we are going to take this company, we're going to turn it around, we're going to take it out of administration, and then we're going to restructure the lead and zinc industry globally. Well, everybody, including me, thought he was nuts. I was his coach. But that company owed $3.2 billion. And the 36 lenders to whom it owned it didn't get on, didn't like each other, didn't want to talk. We couldn't have a board. We could only have an advisory board, and we had to get administrators. And every administrator in Australia up until that time, a company that size had simply cut it up and sold and sacked everybody. So what Greg said to me is, okay, Margot, you're going to work with me, the advisory board and the administrators so that we can think in a completely different way and we can do a miracle. Now, I have to tell you, Greg was not a spiritual person. He didn't have a spiritual bone in his body. He didn't believe in any of the woo-woo stuff that I did, but he believed in me because he had seen it work so many times. So he basically said to everyone, this is the job. If you want to come along, you're coming, but you're going to work with this woman and you're going to do what she says, even if you don't understand it and even if you don't like it, because that stuff works. So Greg was a strategist. So Greg bought the strategy and I bought the woo-woo stuff. Now, I do happen to have an MBA. I am a trained company director. I am a university medalist in education. I am trained in psychotherapy and group analyst. I'm a group analyst. So, woo-woo's woo-woo, but, there's a bit of stuff behind it there.
100%.
So I would come in and I would do what I did, which was basically help people grow around a challenge. So the challenge was the business challenge and the growth was personal growth.
Yeah.
But it was also a lot of growth in how they related to each other. And I have to tell you, when I work with people, they have a lot of fun. And one day we were
I can already
doing...
see that you would. Sorry, it's that fun bit. I could already see they would have a lot of fun with you. I'm sure anybody that worked with you would. I can just feel it.
We do. So one day we're in the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne. And we're doing this strategy meeting. So we had by that time, we were this new company called Zinifex. So we had the Zinifex board who had been the advisory board. We had the top team of Zinifex and we were looking at the strategy. And I can't remember quite what I was doing with them, but it was lunchtime. So I went for a walk and I came back. Now, these are men in the mining industry. We are not talking about, sort of warm, fuzzy, squishy sorts of fellows. And they were all men. I was usually the only woman in the room. I came back. There was music on and they were dancing. And I
What
said,
song were they dancing to?
What happened? And they said, well, we were having fun and relaxing, so we thought we'd dance. Now, if I'd have said to them any time along, let's dance, they'd have looked at me and probably thrown me out of the room.
Yeah.
But they were so relaxed and they were having so much fun. And one of them put on the music and they danced.
I love
Now,
that.
that's the sort of thing that happened because people start to find out they do have a soul and they do have emotions and they are more than a clever person in an expensive suit who has got there because they're good at making money. So what happened with Pasminco was not only did it then become eventually Oz Minerals and Nearstar, both worth $6 billion. So that was an increase in $15.2 billion in the time I worked with them with Greg. Now, as I said, Greg was the strategist. What I actually came and supported Greg to make that strategy work.
Yeah.
Right? So I would help him come up with the strategy, but then I would help them actually do it, which is often the hard part of strategy.
Yeah, it always is.
So, yeah, it is. So that was the gig. And not only did they do that, but I remember at one meeting, it might have even been the same one, The chairman stood up, and Pasmico had a really terrible environmental legacy. There were kids in Port Pirie that had too much lead in their blood. There was pollution everywhere. They had these awful things outside their plants called pits, which were horrible, contagious things. And they also had a terrible problem with the Aborigines in some of their mines. I think when we took over, there were actually Aborigines sitting in one of the mines and were being patrolled by people with guns. The chairman stood up and said, nobody and nothing will be harmed in our watch. That is our number one strategic goal. Now, this is a company that owes $3.2 billion, right? Okay. So, or coming out of administration, having owed that sort of money. So the number one goal was that nobody and nothing would be hurt. And they did. They turned everything around. They became an absolute role model in environmental stewardship, in community stewardship. Basically women started to appear on the board and the top team. They became the number one growth stock in Australia. And then they basically completely restructured the lead and zinc industry globally. So
Yeah.
Greg had the vision, Greg had the strategy. What I was able to do was help people get into that 40 million bits per second, to
Yeah.
open themselves up, to relate to each other, to care about each other, to like each other, and to want to work together for the common good. When you take politics out of it, and that's what happened, we just took politics out of it. We were there as a team to work on a goal, and the goal was a strategic goal.
Yeah.
When you take that out of it and you become more human, it is fun and you make a huge amount more money.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever employed me to make fun. Nobody's ever employed me to get on with their teammates. They've only ever employed me to help them make more money, and they do. But the positive thing out of that is that they like themselves. They really, when Greg died a couple of years ago, and he only wanted a very small funeral. He was a very humble man. He could have had, a state funeral if he wanted to, but he didn't. He wanted a
Mm.
very small funeral.
Mm.
But man after man after man came up to me and said, "Thank you, Margot. Thank you. We learnt to like ourselves." And so we're really now able to enjoy all the success we've had.
Oh, it's so beautiful, isn't it? Like they've gone within, like you've shown them how to, or guided them to go back within and reconnect or connect. There's and I know we had a quick chat pre, but like even I think, I don't know if I mentioned about the identity piece. We tend to have this attachment to an identity or a persona that is always external facing or what people think. And, for me, when I had my burnout experience, that was what like I had to go back and go, well, who the hell am I and what am I? And that was when I connected within myself. And I see it in businesses or leaders that I work with or coach in terms of, yeah, there's this kind of detachment from what's going on within and then the business. And you can see that soul is just, I don't know, I don't know if you've noticed this when you work with our clients, that you can see that it all just needs to connect again. So that's harnessing it to bring it all together. Because, like you say, that's when you get the best out of people, out of leaders, and they can truly feel intrinsically motivated, feel fulfilled, and do the best job they're doing, but also for what's best for them as well.
So I don't know if you're aware of the work of Robert Kagan. If you're not, I suggest you become aware of it.
Hmm.
He's a professor of education at Harvard University, and he writes about adult brain development. And effectively, 63%, is it? 60, I think it's 63% of the population are either at egocentric mind
Mm.
level or they're at socialized mind level. And basically, that is a total description of what you've just said.
Mm.
So if you're at socialized, your identity comes from outside of yourself. It comes from
Yeah.
your job, your house, your partnership, your children. So what I say as well, I'm married to a wealthy man. I live on my farm in Byron Bay. I have I have seven amazingly successful children, amazingly successful grandchildren. I have a huge number of friends. I've, got loads of money in the bank. So clearly, if I'm at socialized, I'm a good person. But what happens if the husband runs off with a newer model, the farm in Byron Bay goes into drought, the children take up drugs, or I lose my money, if I'm socialized, I have not just lost a few things, I have lost my identity.
Mhm.
And that's what you were describing.
Yeah.
Now, from my point of view, thank God for that, because now you can actually develop and go to the next level,
Yeah.
which is they call self-authoring or independent. And if I'm at that level, I have myself, I have a sense of self. And we don't actually see reality. We see a projection of ourself onto reality.
Mm,
So if I don't see myself clearly, I don't see the world clearly.
mm,
If I can't deal with the complexity in myself, I can't deal with the complexity in the world. So what I do is I take a world of what we call wicked problems, which are highly complex, interconnected, and rapidly changing, and turn them into what we call tame problems, which we chunk everything down. If you chunk down a wicked problem into a whole series of tame problems, you're actually destroying value.
mm,
So what I do when I go into companies is I help them go up the levels of adult brain development so that they can actually see what the real problems are, work together as a team and solve them. And I've
mm.
got to tell you, it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
just sorry, let me finish.
Mm,
The 63% of people at socialized or below will fight change. They would actually, many of them would rather die than change.
mm.
So you have to have a big enough problem.
Yeah, well, that's the complexity, right? And that's what I was going to ask you, like in terms of, have you had like in the past, especially with Pasminko, did you get a lot of resistance or like a lot of, I
We
mean, I
sacked
was,
them.
pardon?
We sacked them. We
Yeah, right.
sacked them.
Yeah.
And the reason we sacked them is because the company was in such bad shape and we had to turn it around and we had to do it quickly. The financiers actually accepted 1 cent in the dollar. That's how we
Yeah.
got out of administration. And
Yeah.
I can remember schooling the board and the top team and the administrators at a lunch. Then they went to a meeting with the debtors and came back. We got a cent in the dollar. That's how they got out of administration.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
but I did it with many other companies. I mean, Pasminko just happened to be the biggest one, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk to me a bit about your fun. Like, how is it fun? What do you do that creates the fun?
Be alive. Being alive is fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming out of that box of I have to be a certain way, I have to think a certain way, I have to fit into this constrictive persona, as you've
Mm,
described it,
mm,
is stultifying.
mm.
And also being successful is fun. Having massive problems and turning them around is fun.
I agree. I love a complex problem. The bigger the problem, the more
Mm.
you
Mm.
become creative, you have fun solving it, you have fun
That's it.
finding
That's it.
I call it finding solution finding versus problem solving. Like the problem's
Yeah.
never the problem, right? So how do you then, solve that or find that solution for it? And
Mm.
Margot, it's interesting, listening to you and just talking around the team and the team connection. I've been studying flow state, right? And they have this, it's called team flow. And essentially there's these triggers and the team flow triggers to get the best out of the team for them to shine their brightest. And what you've been talking about is around, well, you need that familiarity, you need to drop the ego, having that shared clear goal, shared risk and those sorts of things. Are they the sorts of things that you've worked with the teams as well when it comes to solving a complex problem?
I look, yeah, I don't know quite how to answer that. I go in to help create strategy,
Mm,
right? I go in to help make good strategy actually be implemented.
mm,
I use a whole range of tools. As I said to you, I have many, many different trainings.
mm.
I have psychotherapy, I have group analysis, I have MBA, I have education. I use 100 different tools to do that.
Yes.
And those tools do free people up. They free up their
Mm,
thought to apply to the problem.
mm,
So unless it is a problem, I can't really work with people because transformation is hard.
mm.
Change is, no, not even change. Learning is okay. People love doing courses and learning stuff, and that's stimulating to the brain. But transformation was when I change, it's hard.
Yeah.
The way you get from socialized to independent is you have pain,
Yeah.
right? So the pain is either inside yourself or it's outside yourself. Or if you're doing it as a company, you have a very strong leader and a really big problem.
Mm,
So that's what I'm really good at. I'm really good at helping people solve really big, complex, hairy, apparently unsolvable problems.
Mm,
You give me one of those, a team one of those, and then we have a reason to grow.
mm,
And they don't grow for to feel good or flex flow or any of that shit. They don't grow for any of that. They grow because they want to solve the problem and make more money because that's
mm.
in their KPI. And
Yeah,
they
hit
probably
the
have,
number.
an L tip or something the other end, and they want to make more money. So they're prepared to undergo the pain of real transformation
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
otherwise people just won't. If people are comfortable, they just won't do it.
No, exactly. And like you say, like from transformation and change or transformation, the profit that's where the profit follow like the profit comes from there as well. Because once you've got a transformed team, a transformed business, well, that's when it can grow, like with what you've done with the mining company. But there's got to be a lot of work involved, right? Like in part as part of solving the problem.
Well, see, I'd say it's the other way around, B.
Which
So I'm working with a company at the moment, and the MD has wanted everyone to come to not therapy, coaching with me, and they don't come. And they don't come because they've got this problem and they've got this problem and it's too
mm,
busy. So
mm,
the how I used to work with Greg and all his people is they had to come. And first they had to come, go down for a day, and they'd have to come in the morning or the day before for a one-on-one session. And then we'd have a group session around the strategy,
mm.
right? Because executives aren't, look, this is not about personal growth. It is, it's all about personal growth, but it's not about personal growth. If I'm being paid by a company and I get paid very well, if I'm being paid by a company, I'm being paid to get them a result. And
Mm.
I have to say, B, there are hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of people in the training, leadership training industry that do not get a result.
Yeah, no,
So
I agree.
people might feel good, they might feel wonderful, but if they're not getting a result, people are taking that money under, in my opinion, false reasons, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, because most leadership training simply does not work. I mean, look around at our leaders; they are not good.
No, I could not agree more, Margot. And I didn't articulate what I was trying to say properly in terms of I could not agree more. Everything starts with a strategy. If you don't have a strategy, well then what problem are you trying to solve here? Do you know what I mean? And that's the first thing I always say to clients, where's your business strategy or what's your strategy? And if there's no
What could be your
strategy,
business strategy? Yeah,
yeah, like
yeah,
let's start with getting
yeah.
a strategy in order because everything needs to be outcomes focused. I guess what I was trying to say was that, strategy starts there and you need then the people to basically perform and be part of it and connect to that strategy. And then once you have it all interconnected, for me, that's when I see the best results with the clients I'm working with. When you've got the
Okay,
business, the team and the individual all interconnected and working together, that's when you get
okay.
the.
So can I just give you just another way of looking at the
Yep,
same thing? I
yeah,
think we're probably
absolutely.
saying the same thing, just another way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So this is out of INSEAD. Professor Kai, Quy, out of INSEAD, and he says that strategy formulation
Mm,
is 5% technical and 95% thinking. Strategy implementation is 5% thinking and
mm,
95% people.
mm,
So basically, it's all about people, but it's all about strategy. So
100%.
I don't say, let's start a strategy and how are we going to do it? I say, let's get together and come up with a strategy.
Yeah,
Because if you come up with a strategy that that group of people are not committed to and cannot do, they will not do it.
I agree. I totally agree with
Yeah.
you. I think we're
So
talking
you can
the
go and get a McKinsey who will charge you millions and millions and millions of dollars and come up with a really wonderful strategy.
same.
But then usually they have to sack people in the company and put in their own people so that they'll do it.
Mm,
I go, well, actually, let's have a look at the people in the company. Are they good enough? If they're not, let's get rid of them. Let's put people who are good enough. So, in Built to Last or Good to Great, they said, get the right people on the bus, right?
yeah.
You get the right people
Oh,
on the
yeah.
bus. Then those people on the bus, you come up with a vision, you come up with a strategy, but so I look at everything that I'm doing as building capacity into the organization and the people.
Mm,
So the today's strategy is simply a workshop.
mm.
I call it a living case study. So I did the merger of Mobil and BP across Europe. Big, big, big merger, right? Neither of those companies were making any money when we came in. They'd had something like 10 CEOs in 10 years.
Wow. That's a
And we
lot.
went in. So we had to do a merger. And those numbers aren't exact, but
Mm,
that's just to give you a flavour. And we went in and we got it all done. And then from London, they decided that they would do a merger with BP and Amoco across the Atlantic. Well, Amoco did not want to be merged with BP did not want Caltex to be merged with BP in Europe. So we had to do a demerger. So those people had to go through a merger, and a demerger. Now, what normally happens is people get sick, people die, people's marriages break up. They are incredibly stressful things to do. The people that I work with said this was the most exciting and beneficial time of our career. We have made more friends. We have learned more about ourselves than in our entire life. So how did that happen? Well, it wasn't about doing a merger, and a demerger. It was about learning to deal with uncertainty, with change. So at the moment, our little thing that we're doing that with, our little, I don't know, case study, is this merger or this merger or this turnaround. So what that does is it frees us from the ego.
Yeah, I love that.
Right? We go from I have to achieve. It's a bit like going from self-esteem to self-compassion.
Yeah.
Self-compassion is how do I build myself up? How do I feel good about myself so that whether I win, lose, or fail, I can still pick myself up and get on with things. Right? Whereas if it's all about self-esteem, if I'm not a winner, I'm a loser.
Well, totally. Yeah. Absolutely.
So how do we use change? How do we use strategic challenge to grow ourselves, grow our team, grow our company, so that when the next challenge comes, and I've got to tell you, they're coming faster and quicker and more explosively all the time, we are better equipped to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's using reality as the grist for the mill of change and transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you heard the term anti-fragile?
I have.
Yes.
My son is one of Australia's top what is he? He's a designer. He's always telling me these books. We've got to read this, Mum. You've got to read that. So, they're one of the books I read based on my son.
Yeah, it's exactly what you're talking about, creating those anti-fragile systems, those anti-fragile strategies. So you're not just bouncing back, but you're bouncing forward and you're better for it. Like when you're faced with uncertainty, complexity, the big problems, you're growing every time. Margot, quickly tell me a little bit about, you've got some amazing books, and one of them is around this peaceful chaos. Can you just share a little bit? I've always heard about organized chaos, and I've used that a lot myself, but I haven't heard the term peaceful chaos.
Okay, I'll come back to that question in a minute. But for me, transformation is about having the peace inside yourself, regardless of what's happening around you. So that's my goal of transformation. That no matter what's happening in my world, I'm happy, I'm at peace, I'm serene.
Yeah.
And as you get older, that gets easier to do. I don't have to worry about my next meal. That makes it easier to do. I don't have to worry about being homeless tonight. So that makes it easier to do. But I could be, incredibly affluent and still be in a lot of tension. I don't have to drink a bottle of wine at night to get to sleep. A lot of my clients in the past have. I don't have to get onto cocaine in the small hours of the morning because I'm nervous or because that's how I have a good time. So when I have that inner peace, that inner serenity, then the world does what the world does, and I apply who I am to the world around me, right, which is a very nice way to live. So the story of Peaceful Chaos, it was my first book. I self-published, and this is how it happened. I was asked to work with a company called Portland Aluminium Smelter. It was at the time the biggest aluminium smelter in the Southern Hemisphere. It also had the most industrial unrest of any site in the Southern Hemisphere. I actually the first time I went down, I went in through a picket line. It had total demarcation. It was a place filled with hate and unhappiness, and people were dying of industrial asthma. There was a lot of verbal abuse. It was just not a pleasant place. 2 years later, it was the world benchmark culture for an aluminium smelter.
Wow.
There had been this total turnaround. These men, incredibly competent, intelligent male engineers, again, all men. And basically how it had started is I and 14 of those men had got in aluminium dinghies in a minka in the middle of Australia, and we had floated down the floodwaters of Cooper Creek into Lake Eyre. We'd been gone for 14 days. We called it a leadership development program, and basically they came back with a vision. And that vision was that they would turn their plant away from the way it was into the kind of place they wanted to work. They also did the same for Portland, the town. It was when I was part of that, and I was only part of it, I really felt like I had been part of developing a cure for organizational cancer.
Mm.
So the guy that ran that plant was a guy called David Judd. He was 6 foot something. He was dying of cancer. He had this huge belly, which was actually the cancer that was killing him.
Mm.
And when I first met him, he said, "Oh, I don't want any of that bullshit soft consultant stuff," right? And then 2 years later, he walked me through the plant with his arm around me and said, "Margot, there's love in this plant." And there was,
Mm.
right? There absolutely was.
Mm.
So I thought, well, the world will come to me now. I've helped them take this from there to there. I mean,
Yeah.
Alcoa, the aluminium company of America, will employ me for the rest of my life. They black banned me. So the aluminium company of America black banned me
Wow.
because it was so radical. The change was so radical. The people in Pittsburgh couldn't deal with it. So I wrote a book about it. Now, a couple of things happened, and the book was Peaceful Chaos. So a couple of things happened. All the people that came from around the world to have a look at what had happened at Portland, they headhunted me, and that's where my international career. So I was asked to go to BP from that. I was asked to go to a lot of places.
Mm.
And then I was very quickly shot to the top of the world to work with the boards and the top teams of major corporations.
Amazing.
So, but I wanted to get the message out. I wanted people to know this was possible. You can go from this hateful, horrible, dying, abusive place to this place of heaven, right?
Peace.
So that's why I wrote Peaceful Chaos.
Oh,
And it got me to the World Economic Forum.
yeah.
Simon Schuster came and then commissioned my subsequent books. So, it was for me, it was a stepping stone, but it was more because I just wanted people to know. I
Mm.
mean, I had experienced this. It was mind blowing,
Mm.
seeing these
Yeah.
people go from where they were to where they ended up was just mind blowing. They won 3 World Heritage Awards for what they'd done in the environment. They actually went out, they built houses and went out and lived with the street kids in Portland and taught them how to use a knife and fork and write a prospectus, a CV. They went on the boards and the top teams of every sort of charity in the town. They started a thing called Portland Speakers Circuit, where they had world speakers come in and talk to the people in
Amazing.
Portland to open their mind. They opened a creche, a medical centre. This was why we got banned, because in Pittsburgh they thought they'd gone mad out there.
Yeah.
Now, by today's standard, that's what we should be doing. But
Yeah.
back then, it was so radical and so new,
Mm.
right? But that's how they went from being the worst in Australia to the best in the world. And
Yeah.
it took 2 years.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
I
Yeah.
just knew it was possible. So peaceful chaos was, this is, if you want to do it, guys, this is how you do it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And, being ahead of your time, like you've obviously done a lot, right? Like it's very clear, like all your experience, but just constantly being ahead of your time and just constantly shaping and reshaping and just this whole radical, kind of being too radical. I've got two quick final questions for you. How have you and I know the sort of answer you're probably going to give me because I'm loving just the fire in your belly and just the way you're, like just this kind of straight to the point sort of style, which is me to a T as well, but all through soul, right? Is how did you respond, or did you, like in terms of when were you ever told you were being too radical when it came to transformation or change? And if you were, how did you respond to that in terms of from a leadership, strategic advisor, consultant, coach, etc.? Because it goes back to your point around there's some not great like leaders out there and consultants, coaches, etc. And then there's ones that are, making a difference but they're sometimes seen as being too radical. How did you respond to that?
In multiple ways. When I came back from Portland and they'd become the world benchmark, I was asked by, I don't know, some professional group of psychologists working in business to come and talk to them, and they told me I was unethical and they didn't want to know me. So that was one response, and I thought, well, that's fine. I know my experience. I've seen what I've seen.
Mm.
You guys can think what you think, and that's fine. Um, basically, I've avoided my peers. That's
Mm.
what basically I've done.
Mm.
Because what I find in my field is a lot of people are experts in a narrow area,
mm,
of the world in which I work,
mm,
and I have put a whole lot of areas together. I did try to employ a lot of people, and that really didn't work. I just couldn't find people who had the breadth of thinking
mm,
and the capacity to work at that level, that breadth.
mm,
And look, there's room for everybody. I just happen to be a specialist, and my specialty just happens to be working with boards and top teams who have massive problems, who want to go to and live in a miracle,
mm.
right? If that's what people want, I'm available. I cost you an arm and a leg because there's very few of me, but here I am.
Yeah.
But I eventually walked out of my business. Didn't like it. I didn't like the way people were thinking. I didn't like the way they were behaving. I didn't like the fact they kept pathologizing the clients. And so I walked out.
Mm,
And I came up and I lived on a farm, and I say I grew chicken and grandchildren, chickens and grandchildren. And, I overlook a field of cows and the Pacific Ocean. And, it's been pretty damn nice. And I've worked in community. I've done a lot of work here with addicts, and with young entrepreneurs, emerging entrepreneurs. I mean, all for free.
mm,
And then I thought, no, I miss the big complex systems.
mm,
That's what I missed.
mm,
I missed working with huge complex systems that had apparently insolvable problems.
mm.
So I went back to work,
I love
and
that.
I'm having a ball, B. I'm having an
Good
absolute
on you. I can
ball. I
tell
love it.
yeah, your energy is just like it's next level. I love it. I can feel that energetically in you. Final question for you, Margot. What is your greatest hope or yeah, what is your greatest hope for like the future of leaders, or what do you see as the biggest gap or potential that we need to close when it like as and think about it as like because you mentioned it I think pretty much at the start of our podcast around like leaders and having the best leaders now in terms of like from a complex problem perspective, yeah, what do you see as the biggest hope and or gap that we need to
Well, let me tell you that I am getting terribly excited about Donald Trump.
mm,
Now, why am I getting very excited about Donald Trump? Because when he first came in, I was very downhearted. I thought, well, if you can behave the way he behaves and get to be the most powerful man in the world, who's going to want to listen to me
mm,
about having a heart and a soul and caring and being transparent and working in community and co-creating? And I was terribly despondent. I thought, well, if that's where, and then, Elon Musk came along with his chainsaw. And I thought, well, if that's how you treat people, if that's what it's all about, and AI is going to get bigger and we're not going to need people that much anyway, and really, what have I got to offer? And then I started to see the results of these men. And I thought, aren't I lucky to have a Donald Trump? Because what Donald Trump is showing us is if you surround yourselves with people that agree with everything you say, even if it's wrong, if you treat people like shit, if you become a total autocrat based on no information, you will be destructive.
mm,
And we're seeing it.
mm,
So instead of now being scared of him and the fact he got to be where he is, I'm just so grateful. I'm in love with the man
mm,
because what he's showing me is that everything I have been telling people for all these years is 100% right. If what you want is a better world, if what you want is a world that actually builds and creates and is constructive and people can live in and people can be joyous and people can be spiritually alive, it is absolutely possible. And if you stay in the lower levels of adult brain development, then basically what you're going to do is create chaos and pain and
mm,
loss and destruction.
mm.
So, I'm for a better world.
I love that. I love that. What a final note to leave on in terms of being for a better world, because I'm all for a better world, and I'm also about endless possibilities, right? If there's the endless possibilities, which is what I feel like I'm getting from you through our whole conversation. Doesn't matter how big the problem is, there's endless possibilities. It's like the miracles we're talking about. Margot, I know you're about to launch a new book. Where can we find out more about you, and I'll put it into my notes,
Okay.
show notes. But yeah, where's the
Thank
best
you.
place to find more about you and also about these?
Okay, so I have to admit, because I sort of dropped out, There isn't a lot about me. I mean, there is. But if you go to Margot at margotcairnes.com, or you go to Margot Cairnes, just Google Margot Cairnes, a lot comes up about me. I
Yeah,
do now have a website. I didn't for many years. But it's there. Along with my books, you can also go on Amazon and order any of the books that I've written.
amazing.
The book that's about to come out is coming out through Audible, but it hasn't been released yet. It'll be released over the next month or two, and that's called Approaching the Corporate Heart.
Oh.
And it's really about how you can be a powerful leader with heart and soul and make a
Oh,
huge difference.
so good. I can't wait to read that book. I can't wait to read Peaceful Chaos. There's all the books. I'll be looking out for the new book as well. Sounds divine. Margot, thank you so much for your time. I've really loved our robust conversation and just everything that you're about and just how yeah, how amazing you are in terms of just all the experience you've had but staying true to who you are and you know kind of always kind of calling it from within as well. And so I just want to say a big thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Bea. It's been an absolute delight.
All right, have a good afternoon.
Thank you, you too, sweetheart.